Hey, it's Joel. Steven's here too. This is Signal, where we sit down for real conversations about leadership, success, and changes we're all figuring out. Glad you're here. Let's jump in.
Today we've got a packed one for you. The stat that'll make you rethink the future of tech companies, the latest on GPT-5, a $1 billion water fight in Arizona, and why Elon Musk just got a paycheck that might have even him blush. Then we're diving into a leadership trend we keep seeing pop up, the rise of the player-coach leader. Is it the future of work or just a burnout machine? Let's get into it. Steven, how are you doing?
I'm great, Joel. It's great to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm having Florida weather out here in Leipzig, just without the beaches. I'm not a big fan, but
We're
guess-
having our typical August Florida weather. It's steamy, but we've got evidently tropical storm Erin on her way.
Beautiful.
Although you wouldn't know that here in sunny Miami Beach. We have beautiful blue skies and the
Yeah.
sun is coming up and I can see Miami over in the corner and it's gorgeous.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. We have a little new schematic for this podcast. So the first segment is Mind the Fact. Let's go.
Welcome to Mind the Fact.
In Mind the Fact, we're going to talk about facts that I ask ChatGPT to curate for each episode. So it's going to be random. It's going to be about tech and it's going to be about leadership. And today we have a fact that, according to the 2024 Edelman, which Edelman is a PR and I think marketing company,
Yes.
they do a trust barometer every year. And then in the 2024 trust barometer, it shows that the global trust in tech companies fell from 78% in 2019 to 63% in 2024. So a 15-point drop in just 5 years. Some of the context given or the reasons given is that while tech used to be the most trusted global the most trusted sector globally, now it's declining across all regions, and it's actually they have less faith in tech in the U.S. according to that trust barometer than in Asia. And some of the context, some of the factors given are things like data privacy scandals. We could just some of the misinformation you see it every once in a while, what the new AI thing on X, I think it's called Grok, is doing, and just giving false information. Obviously, AI ethic debates are a big part of it as well. And then you see it every once in a while, big layoff rounds in some of those companies that are doomed to be the dream companies, like Twitter was before it became X, and Elon Musk cut about 80% of the workers there. And I mean, I watched some of these like day in the live vlogs of some of the former employees, and there was not a whole lot of work going on. They were on a sunroof having 3 meals a day and
Beers after work, right from the
during work probably as well. But I think it's really interesting. From my point, I've never had a big trust into tech companies growing up. Has that changed for you as well over your lifetime, going from the first mainstream usage of tech broadly in society to now the way we do it, where it's almost in anything we do day in, day out?
Joel, it's interesting. I mean, I was born in 1970. I grew up in the 70s and 1980s at the infancy of technology, commercial technology. We obviously had military and some business technology that had been sort of more restricted use by people who worked in corporations and in the government. As consumers, the first personal computers emerged in the late 1970s. And in the 1980s, they became fastly manufactured and marketed to a bunch of folks who were both business people as well as technology enthusiasts. So as a kid, I inherited the benefit of it being in a time period where I was being introduced to this brand new thing. There's a question of trust. Well, at that point in time, trust was tied more towards reliability. As we look at trust, sort of the evolving curve on trust, it then goes into things like manufacturing and data privacy. Because in the early days, trusted a company like Apple, or I had an Atari, actually, an Atari computer, or many had IBM computers. I also had an IBM computer at one point. You trusted the electronic manufacturers because you didn't know what they could do. And at that time in the technology evolution, we're talking about 640 kilobytes of memory that was available to be used in a system. It wasn't like massive amounts of information, or 512, whatever it was at the time. This was a small amount of onboard memory? What could you do with that? What could you store? What could you learn? And the
Yeah.
algorithms and the programs are simple. Right now, you look flash forward, you're looking at in processing power and capability. We're talking about
Mhm.
AI these days. I mean, social media. I could be talking about something with my wife, and then the next 5 seconds, I see an advertisement. This is
Yeah.
tied into this whole data of privacy and invasion of privacy and advertising. By the way, we're going to talk a little bit about economy stuff later, but advertising is all about putting money in and creating an impact and an effect on those who hope to gain access
Mhm.
to and hopefully sell something to. The concept of advertising and monetizing what people were searching didn't exist because search engines didn't exist until the early 90s when we first introduced things like Gopher
Mhm.
and eventually commercialized Netscape. So we're looking at an evolution that moved so fast in the last 25, 30 years. I got to be a part of that. I was an executive in the last half of it, and I've been in the first half of it. I've been either a consumer and or an early stage entry into that technology market. So for me, I look at this like, wow, we've moved so fast. We've also gone a little bit out of control.
Yeah, the initial impulse I had when I was reading it, it's the demand and the expectation of what tech does for us in our daily lives
Yes.
has completely changed. I remember when I had my first phone, it was an old Nokia that my sister had. All I could do was play Snake, make phone
I
calls,
love
and
that
send text
phone.
message. Yeah, you probably could break into a house with it, but I remember back then I had music on it, so I always had it on me, and my brother used to sit at a breakfast table just always having headphones in because he was in puberty. He didn't want to talk to my parents. And I remember my parents always being adamant about you got to reduce your screen time. You can't only use your computer. You can only play video games for an hour, or don't leave the phone in your room when we have dinner together. Now, if my mom's after lunch, if she's on her phone, this could come back. She wouldn't notice. It completely, the expectations we have toward, I mean, as you said, the data stored now online digitally, like bank information, all our financial data, so much of very delicate data that's now on there that we expect to be because it's easier and it's digitalized and yada yada yada. And then obviously, as you said, advertising, but I think also the evolvement or even the development in the beginning of the market of data, like data being a economic structure that you can make a lot of money of.
Yes.
Not just legally, but also illegally, like the data brokerages who
That's
are
right.
like semi on the dark web with those things. It has completely changed over the last few years. For me personally, I've never really experienced a change because when I was younger, you had video games and you were a kid, you didn't have no bank data or you didn't worry about that. But has always been like that. So I've never really had a different feeling of trust towards tech companies. So I thought that was very interesting.
Well, I looked at this question and I thought, well, okay, trust is definitely, there's our breaches of trust from 19 to 24, like things like Cambridge Analytica, where, they were effectively trying to use information and create preference from a political perspective. You try to drive people to one side or the other using information, mining people's Facebook posts, and then using that against each other, using it in a marketing context. Those kinds of things have really ruined trust in businesses that made money around these kind of concepts. That has ruined trust in the technology or eroded trust in the technology industry. And then I think about manufacturing as well. If you think about large scale computer manufacturing, systems manufacturing, there's also been issues related to ethics and scandals related to workers in foreign countries, labor force, those kinds of things. And when they find out about these things, that also erodes trust. Like, how do you operate? Do you operate ethically, not only, in the physical sense with hiring and you're not abusing people and, basically doing slave wages and factories in Asia, but you're also, how are you handling my information? How are you treating my most sensitive information? So there's I think there is a continuum of issues that relate to trust. It's not just about how they manipulate us with data. It's about how they handle it. It's about what they do in their environment with their people, how they treat their own people, how they come to work every day. There's a whole chain of things that need to be considered when it comes to trust.
Well, let's look at what happened in the last 2 weeks in the tech industry all over the place.
Tech shit. that matters.
First things first, GPT-5, the new OpenAI model, was launched last week on August 7th with new modes like Mini NATO for speed, plus a thinking model for deeper reasoning. Project Blue in Arizona, the city council of Tucson unanimously rejected a proposed $3.6 billion data center campus over a massive water and energy demands. Elon Musk's new payday at Tesla, the board approved a $29 billion stock award to keep him focused through 2027, especially as Tesla pivots toward robotaxis and AI. Well, ChatGPT-5, let's just say if it wasn't for ChatGPT, I wouldn't be in college anymore. That thing has been keeping me alive. I saw the video popping up on YouTube of the announcement video, the 1.5-hour video from Sam Altman introducing it. I was trying hard to find Steve Jobs in there, like the whole appearance. It's very similar, and I'm wondering who started this trend, but they released it on August 7th. They also quietly retired the older models, ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, which I believe they started to roll out again because they've had problems with hallucinations and some other bugs on the new version. Some of the early feedback I've been seeing and hearing is that it has better long context handling, but it, as they said, still has hallucinations and makes mistakes, minor mistakes. In shorter queries. The first thought I had, and especially the way Sam Altman introduced it, will good prompting skills will still be valuable? Or if we at some point reach an actual AGI, will good prompting not really matter too much, and the AGI will be so intelligent that it can basically do anything well what you throw at it?
It's interesting. The whole concept of prompt engineering, it's going to get so smart to the point where you're not going to have to be so prescriptive in what it is you want it to do. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, that just say, I've done this, I'm writing an email and I say, revise this, and then I copy and paste in and it comes back to me with a revised version. But I'll be honest with you, I took a course last year on prompt engineering and how to really get the very best results out. And I think if you do tune in and focus in, dial in exactly the parameters, in fact, setting up the actual prompt with conditions around how do you want AI to act? So this is about creating context. And I think what you're touching on is that GPT-5 be more context aware. So it may just, kind of intuitively understand what you're trying to do. But even a year ago, how I still operate all the GPT, whether it's, any LLM service, is I really instruct it to act in a certain way. And I find that this gets me the very best output. Example would be, I'm writing a job description for a new job requisition, and I want it to act as a HR specialist in the technology industry that has an intimate understanding of product marketing for technology companies that make networking infrastructure.
Yeah.
Very specific. And then I say, this person should do X, Y, and Z, see attached, upload the basic responsibilities. And lo and behold, I get something that looks very close to what I would see in a live job rec for an industry competitor that is focused on the same space. It's using the information it has. It's intelligent enough to understand what it is you want. It's not perfect. By the way, we don't need it to be perfect. No. Okay. The moment that AI becomes perfect is the moment you all should be shaking in your boots, because it's true. So AI is imperfect because we're imperfect. Okay.
Yeah.
The information that we feed and train is imperfect. We talked about this an episode or so ago about highly structured content and highly structured topics, things that are concrete to the point that there is no debate. In other words, scientific principles, math theorems, things that are like irrefutable. Those things are very easy for AI to understand because they're instruction sets. They say, do this, do that, see this, do that. If then, do this. Very different than a iterative conversation that's trying to understand what my point of view is and what your point of view is, and like try to sum it up in real time. It's like it's trying to do sentiment analysis and it's trying to do natural language processing, and we're throwing in slang words and it doesn't understand that stuff. Very loose versus something that's very firm and it's well structured. And I think any improvements that GPT-5 has, great. Keep going. By the way, the model training is very expensive. It's very complex. They are closing the gap on currency of information. So you'll notice that in the very early days of ChatGPT, they would disclaim this information has been trained up to November of 2023. That model will give you results. So if you ask it about news items, or it's only going to make stuff up because it doesn't have that information in its training set. Now they're closing the gap on that training process. So the currency of information, the currency and the validity of that is much, much better. That will continue to increase. Ask yourself, what do you think that takes to do? Processing power, which is our next topic. You need high amounts of compute, storage memory, CPU and GPU to be able to drive the kind of training and inferencing that's required in order to deliver the kind of results that you're talking about.
That's the one thing I heard and I saw when I used it the past few days, that the GPT-5 guesses the needed computing power for the request you're giving.
Yep.
So usually in the top left corner next to the conversations you had, you were able to pick and choose what model you wanted to use. So you could 3.5, 4 mini, whatever it was. Now it only set ChatGPT. It didn't set 5.0. It didn't say 4.5. And it'll use by default whatever it thinks is needed in computing power. So if you're saying, if your query is, tell me what's 2 + 2, it's going to use the mini because it's just quick. And then supposedly that's one of the questions raised about this new way of doing it from people that used it. Is it going to actually jump to the needed computing power to give back the results needed for the query you're giving? Or is it going to always use the smallest amount and not give the customer the computing power you could get for your money? Are you going to get your money's worth? That's basically the question people are asking.
This is a basic business problem. I make a good enough product. I use good enough ingredients. Do I need to have the very best ingredients to make a good product? No, I have good enough ingredients to make a good enough product. So it's like going to your local baker or somebody is making some kind of food item. Do you expect them to spend, the very best ingredients to make a taco? No, they're going to go and they're going to get chuck and they're going to get, ground whatever, and they're going to make some food grade stuff for you that's going to be good enough. So if GPT can do something that's good enough based on the resources it has, trust me, they're not going to spend the extra cycles and the power impact and the processing impact that's going to raise the energy bill because it's good enough. And by the way, we're talking about training and inferencing. Training is a very expensive process and they're improving there. And inferencing is less expensive, but still costly. So as you do these complex queries, that's where the inferencing will cost a little more and based on the problem you're trying to solve. But there is an order a variation in the cost of training something. It's far more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the next one because that's pretty much where we're heading with this conversation anyways. Project Blue was one of the stories that I've heard, but it's about a topic that gets sort of lost in translation a lot of times when we talk about this new AI boom and the industry and everything. It was a project, I believe a Google data center was an Amazon data center they wanted to build in Tucson, Arizona. And Arizona, it's like trying to build a hot tub in Alaska. It's not the most logical thing to put a data center that's requiring so much water and energy to work. Basically, for anyone who doesn't know, there's a lot of different ways to cool computing systems. One of the most effective ways is using water, because if you were doing ventilators like you have in your typical computer, it requires another set of energy. So just using water and shooting that across the computers will help to cool them. Now, I'm just paraphrasing. I saw a video of a woman living in an area where a data center was built, and she opened her tap in the kitchen and the water was just sprinkling out of there. So it does have an effect. But in general, when we're talking about just moving away from fossil fuels, for example, moving more to electricity, electric cars, it almost feels like we forget that there's also a crap ton of resources involved, as we see here. But we need lithium for the batteries. You need water. You need electricity to come from somewhere. Now, this is one of those things, going back to what we talked about before, trust in tech and in the industry, because it's going to come down to it. I don't think we're going to be able to outsource those data centers all over the world like we used to do with production, to move that to Bangladesh with the clothing industry, or the manufacturing to China. So it's going to be a lot of conflict about it, because AI is going to grow. I think there's no doubt about that. But it needs a lot of computing power, as you said. And it needs space. It needs water. It needs electricity. And this is a very, very delicate issue to deal with in communities. Where do you see those conflicts going? And I mean, you work in a tech company, so is that a point of concern to you guys? How do you handle your computing power and the data centers involved and all that stuff, the physical stuff?
The industry at large is focused on improving the consumption of energy, because the consumption of energy has a direct relationship to the goal of the customer, which is related to sustainability and ultimately lowering energy price and energy consumption, right? So what good manufacturers of hardware related products are doing is both physically instrumenting these products to be more power efficient, and then also with software using techniques to be able to reduce the impact on energy consumption, and looking at monitoring. And there's all sorts of sophisticated technology and featuring that can be introduced and has been introduced. Things like throttling CPU usage, turning off cores, turning on cores, things like that, which are really good technology solutions to make computing more efficient. The issue, though, at a macro level is that these large data centers are coming in. Now, landowners are not going to refuse the bid. Okay, it's like the mall coming to town in the 90s. Of course, we don't have malls anymore. We have fewer and fewer malls.
Yeah.
By the way, more of these malls are turning into data centers and Amazon distribution centers. So of which, by the way, Amazon, we forget, is the largest consumer of physical data center real estate. Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. So we look at these companies and we look at what they're doing, and they're trying to find locations that have large physical land opportunity, that are in stable geographies. And when I say stable, they're not going to be in zones where there's too many earthquakes or too many tornadoes or fires or whatever. So they're trying to find stable locations in order to implement these data centers. And we've been seeing it in Georgia, Missouri, in Kansas, now in Arizona. It's probably less and less in California based on the cost.
I was about to say, you're not going to put it on the coast of Tampa.
No,
not the right place.
No, but we have in the Miami area, we have a huge amount of crypto. So there's a lot of data centers here as well. And I was listening to a podcast with Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful there, business person who, Shark Tank and all that. And he was talking about investing in data centers. And he's a part of an investment group, and he's actively looking for locations that are favorable from a business perspective on taxation and rebates and things like that for businesses to start up, and those, startup costs related to the physical real estate and those kinds of things. And he's looking at everywhere across the United States as an opportunity, but he's also looking for those locations which have favorable economic situations for the business. So he's not looking for high tax states because they're going to tax, the next company that comes in too much money. So places like Florida and Texas and areas like Missouri, those places in the middle of the country, they have a tremendous amount of possibility because they have physical space and then they have favorable economic conditions. Arizona is, in my opinion, I'm a very big fan of Arizona physically. I love Arizona. My brother lives in Arizona. I love visiting him in Arizona. I think it's a beautiful state. It's physically stunning. It is absolutely tremendously too hot. I mean, I shouldn't argue. I'm here in South Florida and it's also too hot. But here's the thing I wouldn't do in Arizona. I wouldn't do anything that depended on water, because for decades we've been talking about water shortages in the Colorado River. My brother will tell me that they have to turn water off. They have to, ration water in times of the year. And it's the city and the state, the county telling them, look, we're low on water. So why would we want to put a data center? And for all the right reasons, we might want to put the data center there too. Like, well, it's a great opportunity to invest in Arizona. It's going to bring new jobs to Arizona. I'm all for all that stuff. But if your dependency is on a natural resource like water, then you have to think twice. Now, we also have another problem with water. We have rising sea levels. This is something that, science is being able to document and prove. So ask yourself, why couldn't we do this in some coastal town in Texas where we could gain lots of access to salt water, desalinate, and use that water in data centers for cooling?
I've heard. I put the name Peter Thiel together with
Of
this
course,
idea, but there was
Palantir.
an idea that, the idea I heard was to put the data center into the ocean to use the cooling there. But you might say, okay, well, it's a good idea because there's a whole lot of water in the ocean in the North Sea, for example. But the underlying idea or the goal was to be out of any level of jurisdiction, to not be in for example in Germany, which is not very liberal when it comes, or in comparison to other places. The European Union is more.
This is an issue of data sovereignty and regulations.
Exactly, and Peter Thiel has been known to be a little bit of a free creative thinker when it comes to laws around tech and data. So I guess, but it's gonna be a problem and a thing to work on for sure.
Let's just put the data center on the moon and figure out how to improve the connectivity from.
Yeah, right next to the radioactive plant there that Trump's wanted to put up there. I guess so. Yeah,
it's pretty cold up there, and there's plenty of space.
If we're up there already, just put it up there as well. I get it.
I love this topic because it's like everybody wants the data center to come to their town. Well, not in their town, not in their backyard, but they want the jobs and they want the results of the, robust economy. And look, let's not kid ourselves. Bringing a big company like Amazon or Google to town is a massive boon for the people of that location. There's all sorts of goodness that comes. I mean, if you go and just do a search on new data center development in 2024 and 2025, you're going to see there's data centers popping up all over the place. And by the way, depressed regions with depressed economies, which this will bring new lifeblood to those economies. So I think it's a positive thing. It's just we have to have a balance between reality and fantasy. And you can't water cool in an area where there's running out of water.
Just put it in a desert and bring the water there. I guess
that's right.
Well, number 3 is the big new pay package for our boy Elon. He had a big pay package in 2016 that was almost double than what he's supposed to receive now. $56 billion in 2018, which was then taken back, overruled by, I think, a Delaware county judge, because he claimed there was some conflict of interest because on the board there were people that were too close of friends with Elon, so it was rolled back and intervened by the courts. Now they agreed on a new pay package totaling 96 million shares, going up to $29 billion in stocks, to keep Musk tied to the company to 2027. Now, one of the big things that Tesla is pivoting to is AI and obviously robo-taxis. But we've seen Musk in very different contexts, especially this year, not just with Tesla, but also obviously in the Trump administration. He has a lot of other projects like SpaceX, Neuralink. So I just wonder, is it going to be enough to hold him there? And is it in the best interest of the company? I mean, we've seen what detriment he can have publicly on that company, the way the stocks dipped when he was not in favor of the administration and then the people of the United States. And he has a very special way of leading companies, as we spoke about before, with the way he dealt with X when he took over Twitter. So I just wonder, what's your take on this? Will you think it's going to pay out well for Tesla, or is it going to be more of a detriment and they're just tying more stones to their legs, trying not to sink?
Okay, so executive compensation, I have a view on this. I don't begrudge anyone, not even Elon Musk, for getting the very best deal to do his job. In fact, I don't begrudge Cristiano Ronaldo for making $275 million as a football player. I don't begrudge, some of the top paid actors in Hollywood, Adam Sandler, for making $73 million in a single year. I don't begrudge any of these people because what they're bringing is an outcome. The outcome in sports and entertainment is they are doing something that you are going to enjoy, that you're paying money to go and see. The outcome that Musk is bringing is leadership to drive the output of a company that makes products that people consume and buy. If that's Twitter, if that's Tesla, I don't begrudge them. In fact, my wife will say, "Oh, should these CEOs make this much money?" And I'm like, good for them. I would love another zero at the bank at the end of my bank account. I work hard enough for it, right? But reality is it's their deal. Right. So they made a deal, they got a deal. And like you said, there was an issue with there was some litigation related to the earlier one. And that's fair. Like if there is some concern about ethics or those things should be definitely explored and they should snuff those fires out if there are. But if you're a shareholder of Tesla, you're probably looking for him to drive growth because that's why he invested. Most people do, unless you're shorting the stock. But you are looking for results. And when Tesla's first row on this whole topic of executive compensation was when he was asked to ramp production precipitously, like up, like in a huge amount. He was asked to move production to thousands of units per month, to tens of thousands of units, to hundreds of thousands of units, because the company at the time was producing a quality product, but it wasn't achieving the inventory levels that were required to satisfy demand. So there was a lot of pressure on him to ramp production, and that required investment in new production facilities, ramping up production with more staff and expertise, looking at a multi-geography strategy to be able to parallelize that production volume. He did it. So was his compensation commensurate to what he did? He led the company. And a lot of people say, well, he doesn't do anything. He's just the CEO. No. No, I'm sorry. He's there to drive the results. And he deserves compensation. He also, at the time, took $0 or $1. I think he has to take only you have to be employed. You have to actually make money so you can pay taxes. So you can actually say that you're employed by a company. You have to have an employment footprint, footprint. So there was a point in time where he was making $1 or $1,000 or something crazy like that. And other CEOs have done that too. Well, there's a lot of CEOs that get paid a lot of money in stock compensation and extra equity and bonuses, and they pay them $1, they pay them $1,000, they pay them $100,000, which in comparison to the pay of their workers, let's say in the tech industry, is relatively low compared to someone who's an engineer or an executive in the company.
Well, let's say it works out well for Elon to get paid in stock options. It's a
definitely
massive tax break
definitely
for him.
does.
And there's some controversy around it. I'm not a big fan of it either. I get it. If it's a smart move, and sometimes it gets painted, oh, he's only getting $1 as a salary. Like, he's not gonna be broke. He's going to be. He's not going to be
broke He's not going to be broke on his first 10 million. He's not. This is a guy who lives in a small shoebox of a house that he built in one of the 3 or 4 companies you mentioned. He has a small tiny home business which is building prefabricated houses, which are, as you would expect, energy efficient. He lives in one of these houses. Now he has I don't know how many kids he has, 80 kids or something.
13, R2-D2, the little thing from Star Wars is one of the names. Yeah.
Yeah, regardless of what this guy does in his free time, and he says a lot of stupid shit, and he does stupid shit. Like, if I was a shareholder of Tesla, and by the way, I should disclose, I think in my portfolio I do have some Tesla stock, but I want him to drive results. Okay, so if this helps drive results, going back to my comment on the data centers and everybody, wanting these big businesses to come to town. We want, if you are a Tesla shareholder, you want to be rooting for the company to do the very best it can, because you want to see the kind of results, you want to see the dividend, you want to see the results in the increasing share price. If you're against that, you're rooting for the plane to crash. Okay. And by the way, you're not just rooting for the plane to crash, it's all the people that work in the plane that are going to crash, like the people, the engineers, the manufacturing people, the marketing people, the sales people, the distributors, this interconnected ecosystem and value chain that is really dependent upon him doing a good job. And so let's not root for the plane to crash. So let's pray for the pilot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand that you're dumping Tesla stock if the CEO of the company is arguably high on ketamine in the Oval Office with his son on his shoulders, looking like a guy that's selling old porn DVDs in a ditch somewhere in New York City. I get it. It's not the best looking thing. So I think you can argue that the intent for the company is the same all over. There's just some divergence of what the best course of action is. And in this year, with the Trump administration, or with his involvement with the Trump administration, if you put a red line underneath it, it hasn't been very beneficial. And this is, I think,
it backfired.
It
Yeah,
backfired, and I think this is the last big attempt for Tesla to keep him in. We'll see how it goes. I mean, he has a lot of other ventures, and let's see what the ketamine does to his brain and if he's going to take that pay package or not.
Oh
We'll
my
see.
God.
Moving on to our last segment, the Lead Like This segment, where we're going to look at different leadership styles and other trends in the corporate world and give you our take on it. So what we're looking at today is player coach leaders. So basically the Bill Russell of the corporate world. And I say Bill Russell because that was the only player coach. I think Allen Iverson did it for some years. Not very successful. Bill Russell, it was in the 50s. He was playing carpenters and milkmen. I'm not going to disrespect the most decorated center in the NBA like that. But I'm not a big fan of it. You talk a lot about bottlenecks that you're trying to make disappear in companies. One of the pros I heard about it was that it helps, especially in a day and age with AI, where AI makes smaller teams possible to operate at a larger scale. It's a good thing to have, for example, the person if it's a software company and the person that founded it and wrote the code and had the idea is the CEO, but also still the lead developer.
Yeah.
And two of the other things that they said, well, it's number one, they call it staying in the trenches. So it's going to keep the founder, the CEO, in alongside that the people are actually doing the work. And he's not going to levitate above the rest of them and just have no idea what's going on, but they're actually going to be down there in the machine room doing the work. And also it saves money. It saves money, especially the smaller companies, not having to have a CEO and a founder. So I think it makes sense for smaller companies, as soon as you're talking about hundreds or thousands of employees that you have to manage and also being head of some department. I don't think it's a great idea. I believe it strongly depends, obviously, on the context and the industry that you're talking about. But I would love to hear your take on this, and maybe if you've had experiences with leadership styles like that.
In it, I mean, I'm a player coach all the way, and I have to be because I'm in a company that's a mid-size and we have great results and we're doing very well, but we have only a finite amount of resource. So you can't hire executives who don't understand the work. You can't hire executives who don't understand what needs to be done and actually pitch in and do some of the work. And so you're early in your career, and I talk a lot about this in my own on my Instagram reels, and you need to stay connected to the work as a leader. You cannot disengage from the work. The moment you disengage from the work and you have too much distance from what we do and how we do it, you live in this ivory tower sort of halo where you're above everything. It's actually dangerous for the executive, and it's really bad for the team. It creates this sort of two camps sort of mentality where, them versus us kind of thing. The player coach model is keeping in line with that work stream and understanding it, but also being a part of it. And you can argue that people like me who've got 35 years of experience doing the work that I do, I mean, I'm considered an industry expert in what I do. Do I have all the deep, dirty details of everything that's happening in the sector that no, I can't. I try, I read all the time. I listen to interviews, podcasts, and I attend webinars, and I'd go to training and study. All that stuff's all good and relevant. But the reality is, as you grow in your career and you move up, you do naturally distance from the work because you take on new responsibilities. Now, the example you give in a startup context where it's very small and you have a founder who built the code and he has 2 or 3 lead engineers, as you scale the company up and you bring on more staff and you expand the product and the capabilities, you might even create second product, third product, that responsibility of that founder is going to change because that founder is going to be thinking more about raising cash to drive the growth of the company and drive the staffing and increase production of that company so they can meet the growth related number. So to me, it's like the role changes as the situation changes. What the leader there has to keep in their mind, they have to lock in, they have to understand what is important. What's the signal to noise ratio? You mentioned Elon a moment ago. We talked about Elon. Elon has a very good understanding of this concept of signal to noise ratio, SNR. He focuses on the 3 things that are important and he weeds out the 12 or 20 things that aren't important. Executives who have to manage these teams, small, medium, and large, have to have this concept. They have to focus on the things that matter to drive the business, and they have to sort of avoid or kind of potentially just ignore the things that are considered noise. You could look at the signal to noise ratio on the day to day as well and say, should the executive or should the manager, should the leader, should the founder be focused on the day to day minutia? Should they be in the code, or should they be focused on the strategy? Should they be focused on the capital, or the investment, and growing and raising cash to sustain the business, grow the business? Where should their signal be? And what is the noise in their day? So I do believe you have to keep close to the content, close to the action. But I think as a leader, you kind of separate naturally. The ones who create that moat between those 2 points are the really poor leaders. Right. I do think that folks like Zuckerberg and even Bezos in the old days when he was really leading the company and driving new growth, right, with Amazon, AWS and things like that. I think these people were really close to the work. I think they were really close to the decisions. I think that they trusted their leaders in the organization, in the hierarchy, but they were probably, Jobs is a great example. Somebody that would just walk up to someone who was doing a random part of the production and just say, what is this? Tell me this. You have 30 seconds to 2 minutes to tell me, or you're out of here. Yeah. Like that very sort of dominating dictatorship type style. But he was doing that because he wanted to be close to the outcomes. He would say, this is shit. And he would say, do it over again. I don't care. I don't care what it costs, right? He was just an absolute dick. But the idea was he's really close to the work because he's so committed to the production quality of that thing, the value of that thing, that he cannot distance himself from that because he is so scared that that thing is not going to achieve what it is he hoped or what he told his shareholders and his stakeholders. And so staying close to that, making sure it's done. You might call that micromanagement. Do you want to be micromanaged by the founder? Probably not. Do you want the founder to be focused on growth and driving revenue and new customer acquisition? Yes. Do you want him to be expanding the business? Yes. Or her to be expanding the business? Yes. Do you want them to be focused on, infusion of capital to grow that business? Yes. Because it becomes their new job.
I just think, as always, it's going to be a walk on a line. I think there's nothing worse as a leader, a CEO that only sees the goals and doesn't understand the processes in the company. Yeah. And it just comes in and shits on everything that's been going on because the targets haven't been met in the way that they expected it to be. Or at the same time, I don't think there's anything worse, regardless of the size of the company, where everything has to, where it's like a pyramid hierarchy, where everything has to go to the bottom. And just from not even talked about the possible frustration of the employees or the mid-level management who's supposed to have some responsibility and some trust in what they do because they've been hired. But it slows down a company tremendously. But I think at some point, I just wonder if you're Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, if you have hundreds or thousands of employees, to what extent can you be a player coach in certain positions?
That's it for today's episode of Signal. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation, follow us on your favorite podcast platform and share it with someone who'd love it too. See you next time.